Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 intelligent intranet. I'm Mark Cashman, here with my co-host Chris, my fellow detective in crime, McNulty.
Thank you very much. Fellow detective in crime, there's been a rise in true crime podcasts and shows about true crime podcasts. And if that's what you were expecting, you are on the wrong podcast. Because today, we're going to chat with Franck Cornu, Mihaela Nite, and Stephanie Daigle, all from the gaming company Ubisoft, a Microsoft customer and leader in the gaming industry. We've covered numerous topics with them, focusing on how they internally have updated their prior global search application that they built for SharePoint Server 2013 on premises, now fully leveraging SharePoint as part of Microsoft 365.
That is right. We're using the detective moniker because, Microsoft Search with the magnifying glass, that is what we're centering on to learn a lot more about and how Ubisoft implemented it and certainly a lot of the business value behind it. So you'll hear Stephanie, Mihaela, and Franck talk about why it is that the business decided to go this direction, not only to leverage Microsoft Search, but to customize the search experience, to carry over a lot of the work that they've been doing for years in SharePoint on premises, but then to take that bet to move it to the cloud within the realms of what's possible. And you'll hear from Franck, he was actually pushing the boundaries and contributing back to what was possible. And along the way, you're going to get what the impacts were to the business, to their user base, and some tips and tricks around what you might consider should you, dear Intrazone listener, if you get inspired to take your search in the cloud to the next customizable level.
You're hitting on the detective metaphor for search. I remember, going back well over a decade, I heard from customer after customer after customer, the challenge they had with their intranets, it wasn't that they didn't have the right information there. It's that no one knew how to get to it and no one knew what the best ways are to search. One thing that Franck, I know, has been working with Vesa Juvonen from our engineering team on some of the community work that's been done with the core P&P web parts. So those of you who aren't familiar, the Patterns and Practices initiative has for years published and continued to support community-sourced ways of making Microsoft Search more useful, more focused, more practical. It's just great to today be able to explore what that looks like, not in the theoretical side, but making it real. Like, we're searching for better search, I would say.
And we're going to continue that search. Really, the focus of this episode, when we get to our conversation, is to look at the business side of things. We will have links that go out in where Franck had actually joined Vesa on the Microsoft 365 community call and demonstrated a lot of what it is that he's built, how they implemented it, and some of those, if you're a developer or if you're IT implementing what the developer has further customized to put it in place at your organization. There's a lot of those details, and we'll definitely link to that. But on this episode, and Chris, I wanted to kind of get your business strategy sense on Microsoft Search. If we turn to, what is the vision and strategy, both for us and how we hope and want our customers to implement it to give them the best search experience possible for their content. You are pretty close to this in terms of your side of the marketing business, but also just, from your past, having, worked with search for quite some time in the early days of Fast as a separate product, now all the way up through to just a base component of Microsoft 365. How do you think about our customers when they start to consider the move to the cloud, get your email, get your calendars, get your content up there? Where does search fall in terms of when and how early should they start thinking about it?
Well, I think you have to remember that when it comes to individuals' information mental maps, right, for how they go and find information, there's some that are able to deal with it serendipitously, right? The stuff that is suggested to them through the ordinary course of user experience, which isn't even that ordinary. When you think about where we were 10 or 20 years ago, kind of the rise of the graph and being able to customize in the flow of work and be able to show contextually what's going to be most relevant to you. When you open up something like in SharePoint or in OneDrive or in even in the Word Backstage, where you can see suggestions about things that you might want to pay attention to. That's one of the ways people find information. And then there's people who are very people-centric, who find information by asking people. There's people who are very, top-down. They want to navigate to where they think information should be. But there's always a percentage of the population that starts with search. And so understanding kind of how your information architecture works, who has access, who doesn't have access, how do you enrich that content with the right properties to make it something that makes it more readily searched, whether it's with tagging or custom columns. All of those are some of the tools that you should be thinking about for how are people going to find information and why should you be thinking about it? It isn't just for search, but all the information that search is reasoning over is getting into the graph. And when you think about this Microsoft product, we've been talking about it for the past year. I can't think of its name. Copilot. There it is. Copilot is closely coupled to everything that we're doing with search, with permissions, with managed properties. And so if you already have a good search experience, you're so much further down the road to having a great Copilot experience than if you haven't even thought through, where does my information live? And how can I make it indexed? And how do I build these fit for purpose search experiences so that I might only be looking at a subset of my information architecture because I want my searches to run just against these sites, these libraries, these groups, these teams, and on everything else, because these are going to be authoritative for the sales team in a way that a different set of content is going to be authoritative for, say, a manufacturing team. Those are just some of the tools and concepts that you need to be thinking through in search readiness, along with the second thing I want to demystify, because we keep talking about developing search, is there are great things that you can do as a developer on top of search, but it does not require custom development. This is not a toolbox that we dump on the table that is unusable until you write custom code. A lot of this is really driven through configuration, through plug and play type web parts. And so there's a pretty rich palette of ways that you can accommodate the percentage of your audience that really is going to need search to be able to find the information that matters.
I would just also like to throw out, similar to what Chris was saying, in your review of what it is we want our search experience to be in the cloud, to be aware of what Microsoft Search is, what it pulls in natively as far as what it's already connected to from a content perspective, the ability to search from pretty much anywhere versus the old style of having to go to the search center, which of course you can establish and configure and make just as useful as it was in the past, if not more. But just that reality of then, what can I then do to my content to make it more searchable or findable? What it is the graph offers so that people have a more relevant and personalized experience. And to Chris's point, a lot of that is already done for you through the tech configurations or just awareness. And then there's that next mile of being able to use full code in the sense of what the cloud enables to extend the experience. And again, not always having to go to the search center, but to have things like Copilot, where maybe it's a tailored bot that has connection to your content to be able to ask specific types of questions for specific types of people in a certain part of the business, maybe in a Aviva Engage space or in something like Microsoft Teams. So a lot to consider. I think the best thing that we can do for you is to move into the conversation with Frank and Stephanie and Mihaela so that you can learn through them how they did it for their company, a gaming company with the needs like any other enterprise to be able to find content for specific users designed in a way that they intended. So with that, let's turn to our conversation. I am now very pleased to welcome to the Interzone the Ubisoft team. That is Mihaela, Stephanie, and Frank. I want to welcome you all and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you, Mark.
Well, thank you. Happy to be here.
Can we do just a quick round of the kind of the who's who, specifically you as individuals at the company, what it is that you focus on? We'll start with Frank.
So my name is Franck Cornu. I'm a Microsoft 365 developer at Ubisoft for 2 years now. Specialized in search, especially. I'm also involved on the Microsoft community to open source initiative. Maybe some of you already know me through the PNP Modern Search thing that I created a couple of years ago. And I was the developer on the Microsoft Search project at Ubisoft.
Awesome. And Mihaela?
Hi, my name is Mihaela Nite. I am a product owner at Ubisoft for a little over 2 years. I own a portfolio of products at Ubisoft, especially for information retrieval, search, of course, being one of them, but also connecting people, connecting Ubisoft employees and giving them a sense of belonging. And I'm based in Romania.
I can hear already, even though if you read the title of the episode, you probably know this is a little bit about search, but search is what binds Ubisoft, but also, let's see, Stephanie, does search also, bind you to the rest of your team here and the broader org?
Yes. So my name is Stephanie Daigle. I'm the IT manager for collaboration products here at Ubisoft. Basically, everything related to Microsoft 365. I've been at Ubisoft for almost 16 years now as an IT manager for the last 3-4 years. I don't remember. But basically, I'm making sure that everyone at Ubisoft uses Microsoft products the way they're intended to. And I work closely with Franck and Mihaela and the account team at Microsoft.
Wonderful. Well, I love the topic that we're going to talk about and the fact that, some of what the team has built to enable you to combine, certainly as a part of your move to the cloud, but also retention of, how you have still content on premises and everything in between. The hybrid nature of it is not a small feat. The experience, certainly in customizing it in the cloud, is not a small feat. So I want to congratulate you first on updating, from what I understand, your old global search application, which was on SharePoint Server 2013, and leveraging one of my favorite services of all time, the Business Connectivity Services, BCS. Also not an easy feat in and of itself in the past and even in the present. But you've moved to a customized experience with inside Microsoft 365, specifically leveraging Microsoft Search and some other components that we're going to get into. So we want to learn more in terms of what you did, how you got there, some things that our audience can learn. So can you initially, and maybe just as much as you want to share across the three of you, from a business perspective, why did Ubisoft go this direction? How the process of adopting this new search capability in the cloud, different than the old, and some of the things you did specifically in SharePoint and Microsoft Search to make it happen.
Thank you, Mark. That's a great question. And I have to start with the fact that we actually have 15 years of experience with having a global search solution at Ubisoft. So 15 years of history. And before the 2014 solution, we actually had fast search server for SharePoint 2010. And of course, during all of those years, as technology evolved and as the business needs evolved, the solution, this global search solution, also evolved. So started off by being or having a custom solution from the beginning, from 2010, I guess, with a lot less sources indexed, but gradually adding more and more content as the business evolved, as the knowledge information at Ubisoft evolved. So by the time we actually got to implementing Microsoft Search about a year ago, we already saw a totally different landscape in terms of information at Ubisoft. There were a lot more, knowledge sources with different technologies, with on-prem cloud information, with enriched data from a taxonomy tool, or actually two taxonomy tools that we've used in Ubisoft across the years. And with some internal research done, interviews and analytics that we've leveraged through those past 15 years to come up with a much better solution for our users that talks to their needs now. Especially since it wasn't really upgraded for a couple of years before. So a lot of history means a lot of valuable information. We had many requirements, a lot of analytics to look at, interviews conducted, feedback, so both qualitative and quantitative feedback, but also a lot of expectations at the same time.
You started with FAST, and just to be clear to our audience, that was the original search appliance that you would put into SharePoint or build on top of SharePoint. And over the years, again, kudos to our team and yours for being on that journey to make it a little bit more of a holistic experience, just as a part of SharePoint. Search was powered by FAST, and at some point it was just SharePoint Search. And now, hopefully, to how I heard you describe it, that experience is evolved even more in terms of what it's connected to when it's in Microsoft 365. But also, not to skip over the fact that if you've been in the search business specific to Ubisoft for so many years, you also have that base of content and how you want to manage content for the optimized search experience, not just the search itself, but what it's searching for. So I'd love to, hear a little bit more on how you organize your content, govern it, what's out of date, what's not. But maybe, Frank, I know you've shared a little bit on the development side in terms of what you share to the community, but I really would love to hear maybe more of the business side of when you decided to customize elements of search, what you chose, maybe what you chose not to do. And of course, just your experience, if there's a short version of, leveraging connectors and the REST API and other aspects. But first, I'd love to know, when you strategically say, we're going to customize on SharePoint, what do you tell the business? Not the nuts and bolts of how you're going to do it, but the why.
So basically in the search project, we had two sides. The first side is the data part. So how we're going to index all the content we had. So many sources, like Mihaela said. And the other part was the UI part. So first we focused on the data sources part. We did the inventory and so on. That was a funny part, to know who is the owner, how many items, what is the technology behind it, what is the permission system behind it, and so on. So we did a massive inventory. Actually, Mihaela did. So kudos to her. And the other thing was the UI part. And in Ubisoft, we do love custom things. Using native projects, this is not really our thing. So we had a lot of, let's say, UI requirements. For instance, we wanted to track all the clicks on the page, for analytics and so on. And we did some kind of assessment with the Microsoft Search default UI and native UI, and we weren't able to do all these kind of things. So very quickly, we switched to the custom approach and see how we could propose the best experience for users. So from a technical point of view, it was engineered. But in the end, we managed to deliver all the requirements. That's pretty much the approach we had for the Microsoft Search project. It's very high level, but overall that was the approach.
I know a lot of customers, look at these types of projects and they think build versus buy, and it sounds like Ubisoft bought and built.
Yeah.
And to the point, was required. There were things that you preferred or just worked better. I love that we have the capability, that you're able to then do that in a way that meets your requirements, but also doesn't put you in a space where you are so customized and we make a change and then things fall apart. That world, I hope, is a lot more in the past, even though certain things are always needed to be managed, and the life cycle is important for testing always. But Stephanie, I just wanted to ask anything around sort of the business view of the why we did this from 2010 through to the future and beyond, that would help quantify the what you did, how you did it, anything that, went well, maybe even some things that you learned along the way that would be great for the audience to know to avoid, or at least to know about.
I'll start right from the start. I was not part of that project, but I'm really, really happy it happened. But on a operational perspective, if I'm thinking more as for SharePoint. There were no more updates to do, no more patches, backups, so no servers to maintain. So some cost there to save. For sure, we had to migrate our content from SharePoint On-Prem to SharePoint Online. That was a bit tricky, but at the same time, it was good to get closer to our members, our users, to find out is the data still valid and to find out what were their need. Now that with Microsoft 365, you can have a SharePoint team site connected to a Microsoft Teams. So there's a better way maybe to rearrange their data and to organize their content. So that was a plus on this part of that migration. For sure, it took some time to do, but it went well at the end. We no longer have any SharePoint on-prem in place, so no servers, cut down those costs. So for that part, it's really great. And as well, so it's a reason for our security, cost, agility, versions update, everything gets done. And to be honest, maybe in retrospective, to have worked to move on Microsoft 365 and SharePoint Online when COVID hit, well, kind of helped that we were already on that environment. So it allowed us to continue to work and focus on different aspects of that pandemic brought to everybody. So
the notion of the pandemic certainly was not taken lightly. And this is sort of from a position of comfort. We were also in that same setup where we were already in the cloud. I already was working across multiple devices. I often had a machine that I took home with me just, in case, or maybe I took work home or I took a day off and worked from home. But the switch over, especially for your content, was the last version of SharePoint on-premises, SharePoint Server 2013?
No, it was 2016.
So you moved to 2016. For your end users, if you could just quantify, even if it's anecdotal, their experience of going from 2016 to the cloud. And just as a part of your answer, and whomever, I'm curious, what do you think was the time frame of we've made the decision, 2016 is kind of where we're at, and we're moving to cloud, SharePoint Online, and in Microsoft 365, like you said, connected to Teams and making some of those decisions? What would you say was the amount of time between, getting from where you were to where you are? And it's okay if it was a little bit of a longer time. That's not an issue.
One thing I'll say is, like Frank mentioned earlier, we like to develop our things. So when we were on SharePoint On-Prem, there was a lot of customization, which it's not the case with SharePoint Online. And when we got SharePoint Online was implemented in 2019, it was not at the level it is today. So for me, as an end user, to use SharePoint, I no longer or rarely work on documents. I'll create SharePoint pages. For me, I think it's way faster, and so it's easier. End user seems to be getting the hang of it, but we have a support team to help them out and a community as well, so everybody can help each other out.
It sounds like with all that you all, and from what Frank had said, contributing to the community, at some point pulling from them, which is one thing I know a little bit about how you, got to the cloud and some of the resources that you worked with. And Mihaela, I have one question that I wanted to flag for you, knowing that I think you were connected to how Fast Track helped you move. I'd love to hear your experience of working with Fast Track, how you maybe specifically assign them to do X because they were offering, but also just their role, in working with you, how you characterize it. So
I think the Fast Track program arrived exactly at the right time. So sometimes things happen like that. Things come across your, I would say desk, but your desktop in this case.
We can say virtual desktop. It comes across your virtual desktop.
Exactly when you need it. We were already looking at the potential solutions for the search engine, basically. So we were really interested in evaluating a couple of search solutions. And Microsoft Search was one of them. We already started like looking at, okay, would it be a good fit? Doing a POC. Franck was actually the one that did the POC, and taking a look at the results of the POC and looking at our requirements, and especially P0 and P1 requirements, we saw that we want a lot more than is already available. So what do we do? Because there is no perfect solution anywhere, really. And that's when Fast Track came across my virtual desk. It was kind of like, okay, so I think this could work. It was really exciting because we had this opportunity, this amazing opportunity to speak up, tell Microsoft what we need. These are our priorities. This is P0, P1 stuff for us, and this is the long tail of nice to have things that we've already tried or would like to have or improve and so on. And Microsoft shared with us this team of professionals from Microsoft that were there to understand our needs, understand our users' needs, and help us build them, basically. Actually, Microsoft built them and us to test them and integrate them in our ecosystem. So yes, it was one of those perfect stars aligning moment with the Fast Track program arriving exactly when we really needed to decommission the on-prem solution and choose a new solution. And we're faced with the decision, okay, what compromise do we do? Because there is no perfect solution. Part of the, I guess, 6 to 8 months of us working with the various team in Microsoft, because there was not just one that was required for all of our needs.
There are many teams.
Yes, indeed. I think at some point on that Teams channel, we had like 80, 90 people.
Really?
That's amazing. The number of people in the Teams channel.
It was amazing, yes.
It is.
I'm going to take that as most likely you hit a nerve in a good way where you were doing something with a part of Microsoft 365 that, in the early phases of truly customizing Microsoft Search and others, how to implement it and deploy it right and certain things, that whatever your list was. I believe if you were not at the tip of the spear, you were pretty close, it sounds like, where there was the desire to then implement things that would then be standard for everybody over time. The work that you did, Franck, probably I've seen the journey of the P&P search components, not as closely from a developer's perspective, but to see how they were kind of a community-oriented project. And then, the people on the Microsoft Search team, probably people that you've worked with over time beyond Fast Track, they're wanting to make it so that those are easier to use, easier to implement, easier to customize without, deep development. So I'm really pleased to hear that. I always love Fast Track is sometimes an underused service. And it's one of those things, they don't do everything. They don't cover every aspect, but I'm glad they came along at the right time. And it sounds like working together with them, even if you didn't know 80% of them in that Teams chat, you piqued their interest, and it sounds like you got to the right end goal, which is also then part of what I'm curious about. What were some of those things, Fast Track or not, that you learned along the way that I think would be helpful for our audience to hear? Not everybody's going to take on the project of customizing their search experience, but they should know they can. They should know, what to look for and things to think about. And I think as much as our audience, wants to know the why you did it, maybe some of the tactical areas of the what you did. Franck, from a developer's perspective, maybe not exactly what you would tell Vesa Juvonen and his team so that I can understand it. But if somebody's thinking about customizing search or broaden it out, anything, what are some of those things that they should do or not do, or use or not use? And an open question, really, just to say, the gotchas of customizing, and of course, customizing search in what we're talking about.
I would say I would keep the two parts on this kind of project, so the data part and the UI part, the experience side. On the data part, it's really important to really think about your sources and what you will have to integrate and the experience you want to get. When working with Microsoft Search, you will quickly see how the schema is important, the data schema, and how you define it. It's really important to take time to really think about it. What will be your properties and their attributes? I'm going to be a little bit technical, but basically for some properties in your sources, you have to specify if they are like searchable, if you want to appear to be searchable, of course, but refinable, and so these kind of things. And it's really important to think about it before. It will be way easier to implement because otherwise there will be back and forth, and as a developer, it will be really annoying. I can tell you. So when you think about the data, the way it is consumed, you mean to consume the data and the schema. And we came up with the concept of unified schema at Ubisoft. So we have a general common schema for all the sources. They have to basically to comply. Mm-hmm. And we started from there, and it is then much easier to implement in the UI. So for the data part, really think about your data and the way it's consumed. And for the UI part, so at first, you can say, okay, there is an API for Microsoft Search. I can get data easily with Microsoft Graph. Yes, you can, but you didn't think about the experience over that API. It's not just calling an endpoint, getting the data, and that's it. No, you have to think about the whole experience, and that's what we did at Ubisoft. Like, okay, you can get the result, but you have to plug filters, you have to plug verticals, you have to plug the search box. And all of this is not implemented, it's not provided by Microsoft. You have to go on your own on that. So lucky for the community, we did this heavy lifting for you, and we released those kind of mechanism for you as an open source solution. But we had to build from scratch this kind of experience, and that's for a developer that can be overwhelming at first. Like, okay, there is an API, but how I can create a great experience from that? It's not that easy, quite honestly. Don't overestimate the time if you go on the customer approach, because this is not because there is an API that will be easy to build.
One of the things that we talk pretty broadly about are the Microsoft Graph connectors. And you've mentioned a few times a number of sources that you're connecting to. Am I understanding it right that you built some custom connectors? And part of my question is, did you also leverage some existing connectors that you may have tweaked a little bit? But just to understand if that's the right language, you're leveraging connectors or building your own, just to talk about it a little bit in that context.
Yeah, absolutely. So we built custom connectors, so graph connectors, so custom ones using the C# SDK. So we were basically the beta tester of this SDK through the Fast Track program. So that's a benefit as well.
Thank you very much for doing that.
We raised a lot of feedback and issues and whatever. So, but overall it went pretty well. Quite honestly, it was pretty great. So we built custom connector, and we also used, let's say, default native connector from Microsoft, especially for Confluence. It's not over yet, but we can talk about that later. But anyway,
I think that's the value of what you can do. It's not the limit of what we would hope you would do. It's the reality of how business is. So I think taking advantage of existing connectors like Confluence, using what you need, building what you need, that's, I think, very valuable to hear.
Yeah, so basically we have both kind of connectors, some default ones and custom ones. And overall it went pretty well, except, let's say, Confluence, it is really because of our environment and the complexity of our environment. But overall you have the flexibility to basically index any type of source, I guess.
To flip just a little bit, maybe just to focus on the end user, business user, your employees, and it sounds like you included when you get to moving beyond building it to using it. And this may be a question for Stephanie or Mihaela, but curious, when you think about not so much the project of building what you needed, but to then fully roll it out and adopt it, with all users, so that whatever they were used to before, and now there's this new method or new way. Was there anything from a collaboration perspective or pushing the word out and getting adoption and awareness of what you've done so that you can optimize and get value back into the work and time that you put into it? Anything specific you'd share about rolling it out, and maybe even describing a little bit more about the end user experience as well?
So one amazing advantage of already having a global search solution for the past 15 years is that our users already had a global solution to go to. And part of our strategy in adopting this custom UI, so we tried to take the out-of-the-box solutions for everything where Microsoft had the expertise, so the Search API, the Graph connectors, integrating the sources. But then we also wanted to build our own user experience, mostly because we had all of that history behind us. So we actually kind of already knew and had a lot of feedback from our users of what they wanted, what they needed. They already had one global solution where they were already used to going. So just giving them a better application, but keeping the same behaviors that they already had. So that goes a long way into people adopting the new solution. It kind of seems seamless. It's just like, okay, I'm doing the same thing I was used to, but I have more sources. It looks a lot prettier. The experience is better. Relevance is better. And also, besides not changing too much, so mostly the change was in the back end, so that was the hard part. But from the user perspective, it looked like, okay, it's just better relevancy, more sources, and prettier design. So that's what users actually saw. But on top of that, one really important aspect in that adoption strategy that we thought out really early on was delivering search as a service, or making search as a service. And that's where the search components comes in. It wasn't just about having that one global application. So users go to a specific site and that's the global search solution because they were used to. But having the possibility to bring that solution anywhere the user works. So that was really important. So if a user is accustomed to, going to their global internet, let's say, and that's their go-to homepage, that's their go-to, and that's where we want to have the global search. So that's where we want them to access the information. So from early on, we already considered offering search as a service, just as a global solution through the web components that were already developed by Franck, but also that can be used by any other application, not necessarily leveraging all of the information that was indexed. So it does not need to be a global search, but they can also just index their own data, and you could integrate those web components in SharePoint site or a WordPress site. So we really wanted to be versatile from a technology point of view, so they can be used anywhere. And the global search was the first client, the first application, and it's an Angular application that used the web components. Definitely started there, but did not end there. So the quest is still ongoing.
Basically, you can see Microsoft Search. It's not just about Microsoft 365, let's say, boundaries. It's a company-wide search engine, like beyond Microsoft 365. So you can use it from many other sources, like we did at in Ubisoft.
Yeah, I mean, expanding it to whatever your sources are, whether you're contracting it because you're moving things to the cloud, or you need to maintain boundaries, or it's just a project that you can just keep because the investment is not just in the content, it may be also in that third-party service. I'm glad there was that flexibility. I certainly am glad that you have your team that we're talking to here that is willing to do that, because to your point, now we're working on other things and other shared services. I hope that's a good thing. They probably saw, hey, they know what they're doing with search. That's not easy. Let's think about what can we do to customize further, which I think is always great. Lots of great projects, hopefully in your. But I think to your point, what you were sharing, Mihaela, I used to know we had a common saying, keep people in the flow of work, which sounds like you brought them search, which is an important one. I remember the Search Center, many years ago. And maybe at Ubisoft, it's the concept of keeping people in the flow of the game. So now that you've adopted, you've gotten some comfort in terms of what you built, people are using it, and you're in a good steady state for Microsoft Search. It doesn't sound like you rest for very long. There has to be something next. The question is really, for the next couple of months to years, is there the next project that you're taking on to extend search further, or another area of investment that you think is of interest per what we've been talking about?
Well, if I may say, with all the work that the team has done with Microsoft Search, we are now part of the Copilot Early Access program. So all that hard work will be helping us in providing some extensibility with Copilot 365. So I'm really happy for all that work. It's going to help out for Copilot. And I'm guessing there's going to be different connectors to be built to continue the search experience on the different tools and technologies that we have at Ubisoft.
Would you characterize it, what you mentioned earlier around the value of bringing search as a service to your end users? When you add Copilot into that mix, does it feel like you're bringing Copilot as a service, or the value of, this mechanism to be able to assist, not just to search, but to kind of search, find, and create?
I think that for the next step for any search experience is to introduce natural language and to introduce the search experience as a bot to users, for them to be able to ask a question to the bot and get or comb through all of that information that was already indexed from the different various data sources, summarize it, give references, and then basically provide a more holistic experience in retrieving information, because retrieving information is more than just searching. The next step would be interacting with the digital world like you would interact with your colleague, because that's how it was done traditionally. If you needed a piece of information, you would go and ask your colleague. Now, when we are all working globally and working remote, and all of this information is available somewhere in the ecosystem, it would be nice to be able to ask Copilot or any search bot and get just as good as answer.
I'm going to take a stab that you are already looking into Copilot Studio, maybe not only. Curious, because you mentioned bots, so that's where my brain goes. Not to go too deep on it now, because it sounds like we should have a future conversation with Ubisoft about their love and adoption of Copilot. I won't emphasize that too much. I don't want to put too much pressure on you. But any early bird word on Copilot Studio or elements of how you're thinking about customizing and extending Copilot?
Yeah, we have many use cases, but for now we have to figure out, what is the pricing, the licensing, how we can manage this thing. But definitely we have a lot of interesting use cases.
I'm just going to put, there's a lot of use cases we're thinking about. I'm just working right now with Microsoft to get more information on my Copilot Studio as for licensing costs, and just to make sure that the governance behind this is well established and what we create is being used properly. So we're not ready yet. So a future conversation.
Great. Well, it's always good to put the Copilot hat on as a thinking cap. Committing to it, I won't hold you to that right now. I actually kind of want to round out and end on just getting insight. I think with the Venn diagram of our audience and your industry, there's a significant overlap of interest in what you actually produce beyond a great search experience. So do you mind if we go around to all three of you and just ask, what is your favorite Ubisoft game, whether you're a hardcore player or not, and maybe the little why that game? Stephanie, we'll start with you.
I'm not a gamer. I do not play games. I've used, with the kids, I've used to play Rabbids and Rayman on the Wii, so long time ago, but I'm not a gamer. I'm really impressed with everything that Ubisoft is delivering as of games. I've tried once, and I was in awe just by the images and So I was captured by the image, but not concentrated on the game at all. So it's not me.
Maybe on the weekend you'll pull out the Just Dance and
Yeah, maybe, but no, it's not my thing.
Okay, well, we're not here to force you to be a gamer. I just want to say out loud, behind you, I will just ask you a quick follow-up question. You have an amazing assortment of Funko Pops. Can you tell us just real quickly your most favorite Funko Pop that is behind you in this virtual world that we're meeting in?
I like the one from Wonder Woman because, yay, we can do everything. And I like the Energizer Bunny.
Oh, excellent. I didn't see that one. Now I see it. That's awesome.
On top.
With the glasses, and I can now hear his drum. Boom, boom,
exactly.
Boom.
So, I don't know. It's a fun thing that I like to collect.
That's great. Mihaela, if you're a gamer or not, any insights into your favorite game or your non-playing favorite game?
I'm an occasional gamer, mostly due to limited time on my side. So many things to do, so little time. But that, just to piggyback on what Stephanie said, when I joined Ubisoft, I was super impressed on how inclusive the culture was. And that meant non-gamers, occasional gamers, hardcore gamers as well. So I even though I came in and I was just like sometimes playing something, usually not finishing them, I was so supported by my colleagues. They were so excited in telling stuff to me and making recommendations and so on. And what they ended up doing is that they convinced me to allocate time to playing a game. So what I did is I could not help myself, and I played Assassin's Creed Mirage after it came out, partly because my colleagues already told me, like, okay, you can totally finish this one. I mean, you can go through the main storyline or allocate as much time as you want, but you can finish it. And I was like, okay, I will try it. And I was thinking like, okay, I'll just spend like 1 hour a week or something like that. I ended up spending many hours just walking through the city, pickpocketing and NPCs, and I don't know, running on buildings, which seemed like a really fun thing to do.
Something tells me when Fast Track started to engage and started to help, you had a little bit more time to game. And so that was, I bet, the cross-section there. And of course, I'm joking. So Assassin's Creed, did that carry over where you still kind of dip into it a little bit, maybe still, or it was just a test?
Oh, I'm now super excited for Star Wars Outlaws to come out. That is definitely something that I want to play because I'm a fan.
I think that's one of the trailers that I saw, and it almost felt like I was just about to watch one of their, great cartoons. They have such great content just in terms of the Bad Batch and, some of the other episodes where you learn a lot about characters outside of the movie. So that one will for sure be pretty fun. Frank, are you a gamer? Do your thumbs hurt at the end of the day, or?
Yeah. Actually, I'm a casual gamer now, mainly because of kids. I don't have so much time to play, but probably my favorite Ubisoft games, I will say, Assassin's Creed as well, Origin and Odyssey. I spent many hours on this game. Especially, I really like the historical part of those games, especially in the Assassin's Creed universe. And today, currently, I'm playing Mirage as well for the same reason. I think it's just like, for instance, in winter in Quebec, it's kind of boring. And playing this kind of game with a lot of sun and all, it's just like it's okay. It feels great, actually.
That's great. I am going to chalk it up that Microsoft Search powers your gaming experience. And that meant to be a broader statement. But I do appreciate your time coming and sharing more of your experience. I love that you've been on the journey since 2010 and probably before that in terms of, things in SharePoint, but with Search specifically. Anything specifically for you as individuals or Ubisoft, if there's any larger conference or event or something coming up where you're speaking or places you want to point them to, I will take any link and put it in the show notes. But anything you want to verbally reference where people can learn more about you or Ubisoft that they shouldn't miss?
Actually, we released a white paper for use case. So if people are interested how we did that, it's really technical, I would say, but for developers who want to invest in Microsoft Search and see what we can do with that, recommend reading this white paper. We also read open source components as well, so check that as well. And in terms of events, I will present on the user group in Montreal on April 2nd. So
I'll be there with Frank as well on that event in Montreal.
Oh, good. Well, hopefully people will say, hey, I heard you on the Intrazone, and I want to hear a little bit more. And of course, you will have presented. I took a scroll of your white paper. It's definitely thorough, and I'll have a link to it. It's a PDF on GitHub, but also Frank wrote up a post about that. So I'll link to as much as I can that's relevant to our conversation.
So if you don't mind, Mark, I would like to bring a little tip for your audience. Work with your account team at Microsoft. They have a lot of resources. They're there to help you out with your journey, either search or any products you're working on Microsoft 365. They can bring in Fast Track, other partners, or any other resources. And thanks to our account team, that's why we're here with you during this interview. So I just wanted to say, don't hesitate. They're there to help you out. Go ahead, reach out.
Fantastic. I hope that Microsoft always supports that. We love partnering with our customers. And in this case, it sounds like we're leveraging a lot of your content out to the community, which is equally as important. So thank you for that. But thank you for your time. Thank you for the move to the cloud and sharing that story. And I hope you have a great time on the event that you mentioned. And appreciate your time here sharing what you know about Microsoft Search and extending it.
thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Up next on the Intrazone, it's time to focus on events. Spring is not just the time for the return of baseball season, but it feels like it's the return of the busy season for technology events around the world. And of course, if you have an event, we'd love to focus attention on it here on the Intrazone. Here's what we have this week.
So if somebody's asking to take you out to the ball game this week specifically is the MVP Summit. That is in Redmond, Washington, happening right now, where we've got all the minds melding to talk about the future under NDA with some of our most trusted partners. We'll move beyond this one pretty quickly, but it's pretty exciting because both Chris and I are pretty involved in the planning with what our engineering teams are getting ready for and sharing that really for the first time in early looks with MVPs here in Redmond at the MVP Summit. What do we got next, Chris?
Well, Enterprise Connect is coming up later on in March, the 25th to the 28th. That's happening at Gaylord Palms in Orlando, Florida. Enterprise Connect is a place where Microsoft will be there in force, especially focused on our latest innovations for Teams. So if you use Teams, and most of you do, not an event to miss.
Now, if you're thinking about data, the best conference to go to, it's a pretty big conference. It's a relatively new conference because this is a first of its kind, is the Microsoft Fabric Community Conference. This is March 26th through the 28th in Las Vegas with folks like our friend Jason Himmelstein talking all things data and what you can do to make it so your one lake is swimmable. I am not the expert here, but it is a wonderful conference and it is slated to be a big one with keynotes and breakouts and workshops, and to your heart's content, go deep as you want to go. Next is an event that I think Chris knows a lot about.
Yeah, so if you've paid attention to our news, SharePoint Embedded is the latest and greatest pattern we have for developers who want to build content-rich applications that aren't tied to a SharePoint or Teams front end, but leverage all that great, rich back-end content management, versioning, search, security, and more. being able to bring all of that on top of that baseline file storage. So SharePoint Embedded's Developer Summit, our first as part of our ongoing Dev Kitchen series, will be March 26th to 27th here on the Redmond Microsoft campus.
Then to kick off April, we have a special Planner event. To be really clear, this is the application. Microsoft Planner has an event on April 3rd at 10 a.m. We'll drop a link in the show notes. And then the day after, they've got a connected Planner AMA to talk about the news and then to answer your questions about what it is that they shared. So look for the new Planner event April 3rd and then the AMA on April 4th.
Also coming up later on in April, actually the same day, April 3rd through 5th, it is time for the Association for Intelligent Information Management, otherwise known as AIMS, annual conference. This year, AIM will be held in San Antonio, Texas. Microsoft is a lead sponsor. We'll be kicking things off with our own Zach Rosenfield as one of the event keynotes and bringing a large team down from Microsoft to talk about all things content management.
So I'm going to cover two events. They sound similar, but to be really clear, they're at different times and different locations, but the same value. You've got the North American Cloud and Collaboration Summit, NACS, driven by our friend and MVP, Mark Rackley. This is April 9th through the 11th in Dallas, Texas. You can expect a lot of things, obviously, covered around Microsoft 365 and a lot of things Power Platform. And to put a little tease, they also cover some competitive technology. So get your eyeballs on what everybody's doing in the collaboration space. A little bit later in April and then bleeding into May is the Microsoft 365 Community Conference. This is in Orlando, Florida, April 30th through May 2nd. There are a couple of pre-day workshops and a post-day workshop as well, but you can expect a ton of content kicking off the event with a Jeff Teeper keynote, lots of breakout sessions, lots of activities on site, both during the day and at the nighttime. And just to put a little teaser and kind of the scale of which Microsoft is not only supporting this event, but sponsoring it, we've kind of calculated there will be about 175 people from Microsoft at the show to share, to present, to listen, to engage, and really just join in the community that is the Microsoft 365 Community Conference. Now, we've saved one more for you, and I'm going to let Chris unveil this one, at least unveil it for the first time on the Intro Zone.
Thanks, Mark. If you haven't seen the news, so Microsoft Ignite is coming back bigger and better than ever this fall. We've announced it will be November 18th to 22nd at McCormick Place in Chicago, Illinois. So our first time back in Chicago in 9 years. So we're expecting this to be an even bigger event focusing on all the news left to right across Microsoft in modern work, in Azure, in Power Platform, in business apps, and more. It's a real don't miss event. We are just getting underway in planning. So for those of you who have been asking us, when is Ignite coming to a city outside of Seattle? You have your wish. We're looking forward to joining you in Chicago this fall. And our website is live. If you want to get the latest and greatest information and join the mailing list about when ticket registration will open up, you can contact us. Ignite sold out last year, so we're hoping to get even more people into Ignite this year. Well, that's it for our event corner this week on the Intro Zone. And of course, if you have another event we haven't mentioned here on the broadcast, we would love to spotlight it in a future episode. Please contact us through the show, and we'll be sure to put our attention on your event.
We want to thank our guests, Mihaela, Franck, and Stephanie, for being on the show and for sharing all the goodness of everything that they did to extend search in Ubisoft. And of course, the practical reasons, both technical, but mostly the business of why. It was really great to hear their approach, and we're really happy that they're in a good state.
If you're searching for more information, see what I mean?
Nice.
We'll encourage you to check out our show page for links to everything we discussed today and more. Visit us at aka.ms/theintrozone.
You can always send us your questions and feedback for the SharePoint teams or any teams that you think Chris and I can connect with. You can reach us via email at theintrozone@microsoft.com or via Twitter at SharePoint, at mcashman, and at cmcnulty2000.
Remember to rate, review, and tell all your friends about the show. And follow us wherever you get your favorite tech podcasts.
I hope everybody uses the new rating columns in lists to rate and review. That would be awesome. Until then, we want to thank you for listening. We are your hosts, Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty. This has been The Interzone, a show about the Microsoft 365 extensible, searchable, intelligent intranet.